Hey guys, in this video I'm going to walk you through Lab 10-1. Alright, so you might recognize this data from previous labs. We worked with it in some of the early labs that we did in this course. Here we have a listing of sales for a company, so we have sales order ID, and then associated with that sales order is the date, the employee, the customer, the employee that sold the product to the customer's ID, the product code, the quantity, and then the sale price. And then we have a listing of our customers, which we looked at in one of our labs, and we also have a listing of products. Okay, so our job here is to we want to kind of put all this stuff that we've looked at already together, and we want to create a dashboard in Excel doing this. Alright, so we can get started by just creating, we're going to set up a pivot table. So we're just going to click in this first table, sales transactions, and we're going to insert a pivot table. We're going to put it in a new worksheet. We have the whole table selected here. That looks good. What we want to do though is, usually we would just click OK, but we want to do something a little different this time, in that we want to incorporate data from the sales transactions tab and data from the customers tab and data from the products tab all together in a single pivot table. And we can do this by saying add this data to the data model. Okay, so this is telling Excel we're going to take data from 3 different worksheets and put them all together in a single pivot table. Okay, so we'll click OK. And this will just take a moment. And this is a really cool feature in Excel, which allows you to kind of work with lots of different data all together, all at once. So the first thing we want to do is, you'll notice that we have our fields from the sales transactions tab. Okay, now that's because we created the pivot table when we had clicked on the sales transaction table. But if we want to see everything, we have to click the All button up here in the pivot table field. Okay, so now you'll see we have these drop-down menus for the data that's available in each of these individual tabs within Excel. So our first pivot table that I want to create is, I want to have a listing of product description down the rows, and I want to know how many units we sold for each product description. Okay, so I'm going to drag product description to the rows, and it looks like we have these products. So this is beer. We're selling beer, Imperial IPAs, Imperial Stouts. I'm not a big IPA fan myself. I like, I guess Guinness is my favorite beer, so that's a stout. And we have wheats and we have pale ales. Pale ales are pretty good. Let's make this a little bigger. And in the values field, I want to know what's the quantity? How many units did we sell? So let's put that in there. Okay, so now we have the sales order quantity sold, and we have what we want. Sometimes it'll give you the average or the maximum or the minimum or the count, but what we want is the sum. So I have the, for instance, we sold 235 IPAs, and so that's good. So our next step here is, and again, our goal is to it's to create like an interactive dashboard. We're in the module where we're sharing the story, and we want to have a dashboard so that, on a real-time basis, somebody could open up this Excel file and they could get a real quick snapshot of some key metrics for our sales or for our products being sold. Okay, so this is one of the sources of data, but we also want to set up another thing we want to know is we want to know how many different sales orders were sold for each of these types of beer. So, this first pivot table is telling us, well, we sold 61 Imperial IPAs, but how many sales orders were these 61 sold across? So what's really cool in Excel is you can highlight a pivot table and you can actually copy the pivot table. Right? So we get identical to what we had above. Let's just get rid of these blank 2 rows. I don't like those. But now we have an identical table, but we can manipulate this. So we can change this from, instead of having the sales order quantity, let's remove that field. Let's put in the sales order ID. So I believe that is under, yeah, let's put this in. Okay, so here we have a sum of sales order ID. When that sales order ID is not really a number that you would add up. It's more of a categorical variable. So I don't want the sum of it. The sum doesn't mean anything. You could sum it, but it doesn't tell us anything. So I want to change this to, let's change this to count. Okay, so we're going to click count. And now I can say we sold 61 Imperial IPAs, and those sales were made across 10 different sales orders. Okay? All right, and then the last thing I want for my dashboard is I'm going to copy this again, and instead of having the product description along the rows, I'm going to remove this. I want to put the date. So I want to put the sales date. Let's put the date in here. Put this in the rows. Okay, and let's so what I'm trying to see here is I don't want this aggregated. So I don't want what happens here. Maybe I can just expand it. Okay, November, December. Okay. I think this should work. So Q1, Q2, January, February. So what I'm interested in is I want to create a dashboard which shows the sales by day. And so I just want to make sure these are expanded. And I wonder if I can... oh, here we go. If I right click, I can click collapse. I want to expand, okay, expand entire field, expand entire field. Okay, let's see. I wonder what happens if I right click this and ungroup. There we go. So I just clicked ungroup. Okay, now I have everything the way I want it. Sorry about that, guys. So sometimes you you just have to play with things in Excel. All right, so we have count of sales order ID, and I want the sum of the quantity sold. So I want to have, let's see here, sales order quantity, which would be, is that under customers? No, it must have been under, here it is. So I want the sum here, sales of, okay. So we basically combined what we had up in the first two pivot tables and put them into a single pivot table by date. All right. So next step. So we've set up the pivot tables that we need, but now let's create our visual dashboard. Okay. So we are going to create. So I'm going to click on the pivot table. I'm going to say pivot table analyze up top, and I'm going to say insert. I want a pivot chart. And let's go with the standard column chart. So this is our first chart. So this shows us the quantity sold by product type. Let's click the second chart, and let's set up a chart for this, or a chart. So we're going to do pivot chart. We're going to also do a column for this. We'll click OK. And this is number of sales IDs. So we'll put this right underneath. Okay. And then let's create a third pivot chart, and let's do pivot chart, and let's do, instead of doing a column, let's do a line. Okay, so we're going to make this into a line. We'll click OK. Okay, and now we have our third chart here. All right, so this is a little dashboard that we set up, so somebody could open up this file and they could quickly come in and see visually, you know, what's going on with IPA, or what's going on with wheat, or what's how are we selling by day. It looks like we dipped between the 16th and of January and the 26th. What caused that dip? Okay. Another really cool thing we can do is we can add something called slicers. So if we click on one of these pivot tables, we'll do pivot table analyze, we'll say insert slicer, and we want to slice this data. Let's say we slice this data by, let's click all here, let's slice it by customer state. So we're gonna like basically say, you know, all right, well, if we sold this many IPAs, but how does that break down by state? Okay, so we're gonna add, Excel calls it a slicer. It's a filter, whatever you want to call it. It's a way of subsetting or looking at a subsample of the data. We want to do this by state, and let's do this by product description. Okay, click OK. So now we have two slicers, and let's kind of zoom out a minute here, and we can drag these slicers into our dashboard. So we have our product description, we have our state, right? And so somebody could come in here now. This is share the story, so somebody could come in this file and they want to know the story of, and let's change the settings here for a second. Let's go to slicer settings, and nope, that's not what I want. And report connections, and I want to make sure my slicer applies to all three of these charts I just set up. So I'm going to check all three boxes here. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to right click this. I'm going to go to report connections, same thing here, click OK. Alright, so now somebody comes in and they say, well, how are we doing in Iowa? You click Iowa, and these tables and charts will automatically update. So here is how we are doing specifically in Iowa. Alright, we can undo that. How about, how are we doing with wheat? So these two charts aren't going to tell us anything new, but now we have like a sales trend for wheat beers across the different dates. You'll notice Iowa, right? Iowa's grayed out down here. It's because there were no wheat beers sold in Iowa. Why was that? I don't know. So maybe we can go investigate that. That doesn't make any sense. Do people living in Iowa not like wheat beers? Well, or do we have a problem with our distribution, or maybe our sales rep is not pushing wheat beer enough? Who knows? But you know, this dashboard is the start of, you know, additional questions. We can clear that filter, and really, you know, these slicers will allow you to kind of quickly look at different subsets of the data by just clicking. All right, so you know, this kind of is putting together all of the pieces that we've done in previous labs, and now we have an interactive dashboard. We're now able to share this file, we're now able to share the story, and help people understand what we see in the data. So hopefully you found this video helpful, and I will talk to you all soon. Take care.